Hi guys, most of you would know the Unity asset store. There's a lot of good assets on there. I found most of the assets from the Unity asset store can be used in CopyCube. Some of the animations maybe not. They're a bit more difficult. I'm just talking about static objects mainly. And some of the animated would probably work as well, but that's a bit trickier, that one. And the prices are pretty good for the most part. In terms of Unreal assets, I've hardly been able to load a single thing into CopyCube in a good manner with Unreal Asset Store because the polygon count's just too high. Plus their format of the texture is a bit different, most cases. Yeah, so I've been able to load stuff in CopyCube, but the quality hasn't been very good because I've had to decimate it so much in Blender to get the poly count down. So I hardly ever even bother with Unreal assets anymore. I just give it a miss because they almost never work. And then on top of that, at least previously, a lot of their assets they rely heavily on the for the stuff that I want on metallic, which CopperCube can't do unless you use just in case a shader. That might work then, it might be okay. But in any case, yeah, I don't even bother with Unreal assets as a general rule anymore. Yeah, it's always super high poly count. Unity Asset Store is very good. I found one of the better ones, and Sketchfab probably my two favorite. So anyway, now if you want to export stuff out of Unity for CopyCube, what I use is OBJ exporter. So it's this one here, Scene OBJ exporter. Yeah, so what you do is import that in. It's already loaded into my account at the moment, and it probably won't work on the latest version of Unity. It tends to work on the older versions, better support. This one I'm using at the moment is 2018.4.17. I think the latest is like 2020 or something or other at the moment. So this is an older version, just mainly for the getting the assets out of it actually for CopyCube. So once you've done that, you imported and loaded that OBJ exporter. It's actually free. I'm pretty sure it was free. So then you'll have a new menu at the bottom here, File, Export. There it is, Wavefront OBJ. So then you just go to your scene. You can either export the whole thing, or if it's a prefab and you're editing the prefabs, for example, you want to do some stuff with it before you export it, I'm just selecting just that part of the whole scene because the scene is really big. I don't need the rest of it, just that. File, Export, OBJ, just the selected objects. In terms of materials and stuff, none of that works. You just have to get the materials directly from the folder in the Unity folder. So you just export that out. I'll just overwrite that. Okay. So what I typically do from here is go into Blender. I use both the new version and the old version. I still like to use 2.79. I haven't fully worked out 2.8 yet. They always keep changing stuff. But anyway, I'm always a bit slow to pick up on all the changes. But anyway, 2.79 I do like. You can still get it if you look for it. I use both. Just depends on the situation. Now for okay. So for me, it's under Downloads, Unity Exports, Unity 1. Okay, there it is there. Okay, I use navigation and walk a lot. I'm sure there's probably better methods, but that's just what I use. So there's your model. The textures won't load by default. Put a lamp, add a sun. So there's no textures. So as you see, you've got the different textures, the names there under under this little round object, material. You can load them in. So you select Atlas 05, go to material, then you click on this little image here, open that image. You know, there's lots of little buttons in Blender that do a lot. You just got to know, unfortunately, all these little buttons, what they do. Okay, so select where the textures are. I've got them already set up myself here. So that's Atlas 5, Atlas 01. So it'll, whatever one you highlighted, it'll just stay with that. 01. Go down here, and then you can click on the history, the recent history, textures 01. Okay, so as you work your way down, once you see like the preview here with the texture on it, you know it's been loaded. It'll automatically expand this like that. So now it's got those two textures. They're both in grey. If it's not, it'll just be white. So that's alright. That's alright. That's alright. This one needs loading. Get back to here. So you just work your way down doing all that. So there's another one, 8. Thankfully with this one there's really not that many textures. It's actually a really good model. All the textures are just basically 8 main textures, so that's pretty good. Yep, so I'll go through all this and work my way, and I'll be back in a sec. Okay, so I've loaded all the textures. I don't know if you really have to do this, but I prefer to do it. So like you've got all these individual objects, make a copy of it as it is, just go File, Save, but then I want to join them all together in one big mesh, because when it loads in CopperCube it's one big mesh anyway. But I think it might help in Blender first if you do that with the textures. I could be wrong on that one, but yeah, I have a tendency to like to do that. And you can always undo it anyway. So you go select on one of the meshes, right click, then double A, select all, Control J, join them all together. So they're all joined together now as one big mesh. I'll split all these parts up separately in CopperCube, that's fine. But here, now I can see all the textures in one, so they can see any missing ones a lot easier that way. That's glass, that's actually a colour, that's alright. That one's a colour, that's alright. So yeah, they're all loaded. Except for this red one, I think, yeah. So you can go New, Open. For this particular one, I'm gonna just take just a basic one to start with. I can change it later. So there's that. So they're all loaded. Once you're happy that they're all loaded, yeah, so then you can just export it out and load it in a CopperCube. Now this is a bit of a thing I've just realized lately. Getting the shading properly on curved surfaces is a bit of a problem with, well, it's not really a problem, but you've got to just know a little bit about it. So we've selected the mesh. It will always by default auto smooth, which is actually a good thing, because if you don't, it'll then see all the blocky faceted polygons. And if you're using normal maps in CopperCube, it'll make it look terrible. It'll even be worse. So there it is there. This is Blender, and it looks obviously like that. Looks terrible. And if you load that in CopperCube as is, and then add normal maps, it'll be even worse. So you really don't want that. But what I've noticed, even if you auto smooth and then try and load the blend file, you can actually load. This is 2.79 Blender, an older version. You can't in that version you can load that into CopperCube directly, but I don't recommend you do that. Always export it back out. Typically in the same format that you loaded it is actually a very good. I've had the least amount of problems that way. or if not, go with OBJ or DAE is my two favorite ones. So if I save that as it is with Autosmooth, you actually can't shade smooth that. Normally you can shade smooth even without Autosmooth on, typically. So you would normally select it, go tab, go into edit mode, and then you would go space, shade smooth. Now it actually didn't do anything, but it is, I don't know why, I think it's this particular mesh has some slight normal issues, whether it's an issue or what, I don't know. Normally when you go shade smooth like that, it'll perfectly smooth that surface out, so it's fine to then load into CopyCube, even from the blend file typically. But because this one is not doing that, it will have issues, so I don't recommend you load the blend file. So for example, so there's one I just saved. It used to be good because with the blend file it's already got everything, loads fairly quick, all the textures are loaded up by default. The only other one as good as that would probably be DAE, which has all the textures as well. Now what I always do is save it at the pivot point, put it back to 0, change the scale. I know the scale for this particular one is that 999. With loading a blend file, you've always got to typically rotate it either not minus 90 or positive 90 degrees. For this one it's positive 90. Now the problem I've had that I don't remember having for quite a long time with loading the blend file is for this particular one, and there's no way I can fix it. I couldn't fix it no matter what I did, apart from importing a different file format. Was so once you load it in, once you click dynamic lighting, and you've added a a directional light in like that. See that? See how the it's faceted normals? It's all blocky looking, looks crap. Basically. Yeah, so because it's like that, you will not be able to fix it no matter what you do in CopperCube. It will not be repairable in any way, whatever shape or form. The internal inbuilt CopperCube things will not fix it. Free scales and normalized normals, you would typically do that and then go recalculate normals, tangents and binormals. Don't use that at all. If you've got to this level and all you've done is loaded it and put dynamic lighting in, and you're seeing faceted normals or blocky normals like that, I wouldn't even use the file at all, because it's no good. You can't repair that no matter what you do. So what a solution to that is simply just don't load the blend file. So yeah, it looks perfect like that in Blender, but just export it back out to the same format, OBJ. And then load that, and that typically will fix it. I don't believe you need to modify the settings in Blender on the left there. I've tried a few different methods and they all seem to work pretty good when you do it this way. Just load the same format, and so long as it's OBJ or DAE. FBX is a hit and miss. I don't use FBX. It's very problematic file format because there's different versions. There's lots of different versions. If you don't have the right one, it may work or may not work properly, or may work partially and then cause problems later. It's yeah, I don't like using it actually. Alright, so test 1A, that's the file, just to show you. So same thing again, center the pivot point. And by the way, those textures actually did load, which is good. It doesn't always work with OBJ, but in this case it did, which is good. And now dynamic lighting, and see how it's still smooth, it still looks pretty good. So that's what you want. You've got to have the smooth look, the really good look, before you add normal maps. Otherwise, and that's with dynamic lighting on, not without dynamic lighting. So once you've got dynamic lighting, just to check it out, and it still looks good and smooth, then you know it'll be fine for using normal maps. It won't be perfect, but you'll see some issues, but it won't be that bad compared to what it would have been any other way. So that looks pretty good. You'll see now a bit of faceting of the normals when you use a normal map textures, but there's no way around that. That's just a CopperCube issue. Yeah, until Nico fixes it, hopefully one day. I'll show you an example. Alright, so there's a texture. That's the normal map for it. I'll just update it here. So now we change that to normal map. Adds more detail, does look better. And I do need to use normal maps because it changes the indoor and outdoor lighting to light and dark, and I need to use that in my game. So now it's not perfect. If you notice, those corners are a bit weird. There's a little bit of faceting of the normals there. That's unfortunately as good as you're going to get it in CopyCube with normal maps. But you only see that when you're really up close. When you're at a little bit of a distance, you just see a little bit. That's unfortunately as good as you're going to get it. Now notice at the ends there are not quite right. There's shading issues there. I'll show you how to fix that. You can now use one of the inbuilt things in CopyCube to repair that. See, it's all wrong, the ends. Yeah. Okay, so what you do, alright, this is how I always do it. I always rescale it up early, and I do it to the entire thing, so I only have to do it once. So I don't have to do it in sections later. So I go freeze scale, normalize normals, scale, change to 100, 100, 100. Don't know why you need to do this, but it does. It's the only way. If you don't do it, it usually won't fix it properly. Now freeze scales and normalize normals again, and now go into recalculate normals and tangents. Don't use smooth normals and tangents, and don't use improved smoothing. Those two, for the most part, almost never work, except for some minor meshes that they might work, particularly for squarish objects where it doesn't really matter. It may look better if you do that, but here, really, this is the only one that I use. Recalculate normals. So now that should be repaired. So if I put it back to the way it was, so it's 1%, 0.01, 0.01, 0.01, back to the way it was. Yeah, you still got some blockiness, but that is as good as you're going to get it. But you notice it's actually repaired the ends of it. Those ends are a lot better now than what they were. So, and there's a lot of little minor things around the place that you may not have noticed have been fixed up too. So this was an issue before. Look, it's not perfect the way it is, obviously. It is still a little bit blocky, but that's as good as you're going to get it in CopperCube, I've noticed. Unless there's a method to change the intensity of the normals applied in CopperCube, yeah, you won't be able to fix it, I don't think. Nico probably knows a way to do it. I don't know if he will though. So yeah, so that's how, at least for the most part, it's at a distance. It's not too bad. A little bit of a distance, it's all right. And if you didn't do it that method, it would look worse. So that's something you just have to do. Yeah, so that's how you can get stuff out of Unity into CopperCube and use normal map textures and get it to look reasonably good still. Now here's another problem I want to show you. This particular asset from Unity itself the rotation was skew if. Notice how the corner of the building is not lining up to the surfaces properly. So in other words, every time you grab out an asset and separate it off from the main one, and then if you want to put it back in the same spot, just go 0. See how, and then you can go center pivot point. Then notice how the outer box is skew if. It's not. It's the asset itself is rotated from the beginning. I've noticed in Unity, that's where it all comes from. You won't be able to fix that in CopperCube. And also, if you're using, for example, my plugin to build the asset level up a bit, the Snap to Grid plugin that I made, I believe that'll stuff that up as well. I'm pretty sure, because it's not lining up properly to the size of the mesh. It's completely different. So I'm pretty sure you'll find that that'll not work. You'll have to fix that, and I'll show you how to fix that now. So in other words, delete that, go back into Blender. Now what I've noticed with this one, it took me a bit of trial and error, but I worked it out. It was 50 degrees out on the what would be the equivalent of the y-axis in CopperCube, but in Blender it's the z-axis. So if we go N, just click on, hang on, N. So there you go. It brings up another menu. Just select N. There it is. Rotation, that's okay by itself. It's not the X I'm worrying about, and the Y is not the Y in CopperCube. It's actually Z. It's this one here. So I'll just navigate away so you can see. So we're going to change, so it's all one asset, so I can, it's all combined, so if I change the rotation it's okay with the whole thing, but if it was in separate parts, I'm pretty sure it stuffs it up actually. So here, a bit of trial and error, I worked out it was 50 degrees on the Z-axis out. So it's rotated it. So now, if I export that to OBJ and load that into CopperCube, same thing again. I always center the pivot point. Let's just religiously always do that, and the scales, and freeze it. So now if I was to grab an asset out, like say for example this block, so I want to create a separate thing so I can use it by itself, create new mesh, go to the original one, delete it, drop it under as a child, zero it out so it's in the exact same spot, because this actually does matter for this particular one matters, this position. So the pivot point, yep, so now it is there. You'll find now it's actually lined up perfectly. So in other words, CopperCube ignores whatever rotation it seems in Blender that you've applied it to, or at least it resets it back to zero. It picks it up and then resets it back to zero. In this case, yeah, it was exactly 50 degrees out. Bit of a strange angle, but yeah, you'll only sometimes get that problem, but it's not very often. But anyway, that looks pretty perfect to me. So that shouldn't cause any issues now with my snap to grid and plug-in and so forth. So that's another issue fixed. Yeah, so there it is. Unity assets into CopperCube, fixed rotation, and with smooth normals. I hope you like that. Cheers.